Hello everybody, welcome back to Norwich Talk for another transfer speculation rumour type video. Yes, we're back on the grind. It's been a few days, but in today's video we'll be chatting about Ben Gibson. And as I said in my Alfie Mawson video, this is a slightly different video in that I don't really think there are much sort of substance to the rumours that he is potentially joining Norwich. I'm going to answer the question, should he join Norwich? But the sort of format of the video will remain the same in that we'll sort of go through his career and then think about what he can bring to Norwich City and whether he'd be a sort of realistic signing and whether it would be a sensible signing from Norwich City. Ben Gibson is one of them players who a lot of Norwich City fans want to sign. That's been the case for the past 2 or 3 years, really. So in today's video, we're going to go over what we know about him, and as I said, why he should or should not be joining Norwich City. So in the usual fashion, we'll crack on with what we know about him. I've got my notes in front of me here, and you'll see to the side of me on the video, we'll sort of make a collection of these notes because it sort of is a good reference point for us all. I think it makes the video a little bit easier to follow. But we know that he's 27 years old, he's English, he's a centre-back, and he's 6'1", and that's everything in terms of his physique, country, position, whatever. Now, in terms of his actual playing career, he spent from 2005 to 2018 at Middlesborough, so that was some of his youth career, and quite a lot of his senior career so far. So, you know, he's a one-club man, it seems. Although, having said that, there are 4 loans within that sort of period. He played 185 games for Middlesbrough in total, and we'll get on to sort of the importance of that experience in a minute. In 13-14 season, that was sort of the introduction to Ben Gibson in terms of him playing more regular football. That was the season before Karanka was hired for them. And then in the 14-15 season, he played a lot more games. Of course, he played in the playoff final against Norwich City. I'm sure we all remember how that game went. Then following it up in the 15-16 season, he got promoted with Middlesbrough finishing in second behind Burnley. It's mad how all these clubs sort of tied together in terms of Ben Gibson. The following season, they were obviously relegated in a pretty poor season for them. Karanka was then sacked that season. No idea where he is at the moment. I think he's gone to Birmingham now. So we'll see him again next season in the Championship, won't we? And then in the 17-18 season, he played every single game. They got into the playoffs again. They finished 5th, but then they lost to Aston Villa, who then went and lost to Fulham. So he's sort of been round the mill. He's been round the block with Middlesbrough. He then moved to Burnley for a reported fee of £15 million. Now that £15 million fee will be another reference point for a little bit later in the video. But he's played 1 game in the Premier League for Burnley over 2 seasons, which again is an interesting talking point, and that will probably be what we sign off with in the video. Now, what I take from that is the fact that he's played 153 games in the Championship. But not only that is the fact that he's also left-footed. Now, in terms of being left-footed, Norwich City currently don't have any left-footed centre-backs. I think Tim Closer is sort of the most left-footed player you'll get, as we so often see from kick-off. He loves to just get the ball and sort of ping it down the line. Usually it's fairly ineffective, but it sort of releases the pressure from Norwich City. And that's about all we have in terms of left-foot ability in regards to centre-backs, that is, of course. So I think that's sort of one of the main reasons that people want to sign him, because he sort of brings that natural harmony to the team, which is such an important part of the way Norwich City play football, because it's meant to be fluid, it's meant to be from the back, and if you're having to worry about putting it on your strong foot when you're on the left hand side, that's a problem, because that's something that then requires thought and might sort of halt the process of Norwich City moving up the pitch. And to have an actual sort of left footed centre back, I think it's just important in general. We saw Jan Vertonghen for so many years at Spurs be so good, and also the fact that he could sort of quite comfortably stroll down the left hand side and not have to worry about sort of putting it back on his right, which is such an important part of the way Norwich City will play, and hopefully will continue to play in the upcoming season. But, you know, going back to the 153 games in the Championship, one thing that Norwich City are going to need going into the Championship is someone who knows the league very well. Now, a lot of this squad know it fairly well. They won it only a couple of seasons ago now, and at the same time, you can argue they've got enough Championship experience now, but you're going to want to bring some people in who don't have that sort of Premier League curse, that cursive season, that 1920 season that's just finished with, under their belt. And a player like Ben Gibson sort of knows the situation. He's been relegated from the Premier League before. He knows what it takes to almost get back up. You know, his experience, if he'd gone up with Middlesbrough, that experience would have been even more valuable, but he knows what it's like to sort of bounce back from relegation in the Premier League. Now, sadly, they couldn't win the playoffs from their perspective in the the 17-18 season, but he knows what it takes to sort of get there. So my natural assumption about Ben Gibson is that he's fairly mentally strong. You'd like to think he is after sort of the experiences that he's had. Now, I think we all know it's him from his Middlesbrough days, of course, because he spent so long there, 13 years, of course, and we'd seen him play, lost to Norwich at Wembley, sort of, as I said, I've said 3 or 4 times now, he's been round the mill. Now, the interesting thing for me is how his Burnley career has gone. The £15 million price tag sort of put a bit of pressure on him, and I said the same about Alfie Mawson, because apparently he was signed for £20 million, and a price tag often puts a lot of pressure on a player, and is also inflated when a player is English, and Ben Gibson's obviously English. Again, that's a good option for Norwich City in terms of the homegrown rule, which we're going to need to sort of abide by. I say sort of, we'll need to abide by going into the Championship season. But if we move back to Burnley, he's played 1 game in the Premier League in 2 years for them, and he sort of started his career off okay at Burnley, played a few games in the Europa League qualifiers. Now, you know how important I think that sort of experience is for players. We talked about it in terms of Danel Sinani, I think Pochetta as well, one of the other players who have joined, they sort of all merge into one at this point. But he's got that experience, that European experience. He won a couple of games, in fact, with Burnley in the qualifiers, and then he played 1 game in the Premier League, and then he picked up a hernia injury. Now, that hernia was a recurring injury for him that sort of haunted him for, I think, about 6 months in the end, and then there's sort of a gap between 2019 and sort of now, really, where I think, according to reports, now I'll link an article that I read from Lanks.live about how he sort of fell out with Sean Dyche a bit, fell out of favour. I don't really know what went on, to be honest with you. He's been training with Middlesbrough as of, I think, July maybe, which is a bit weird because he's got 2 years left on his contract at Burnley. But I don't want to sort of speculate attitude and stuff too much before we actually know the situation, because we know how sort of dangerous that game is, really, to make assumptions about a player. But I do find it quite peculiar that he sort of has fallen out of favour with Sean Dyche, because he's very highly rated, isn't he, Ben Gibson? When you pay £15 million for a centre-back, whatever club you are, there is sort of that expected quality, and the fact that Sean Dyche is so resilient, has basically said he's not playing for Burnley anymore, raises a few eyebrows. Now, I don't really know how that would affect him signing for Norwich City. I don't know if that means he's got attitude problems, or if it just means he sort of wanted more football than what he was getting following his injury, whatever, because you look at the emergence of James Tarkowski and playing fairly well from his perspective. I think he got a call up for England, didn't he? I think he's part of the England squad or whatever. But for me, the eyebrows are raised at the fact that he's just not featured for Burnley. My questions are why. Now, I'd love to answer the question why, but I can only speculate, and everything that I have speculated so far is all that I will continue to speculate in terms of he couldn't get that consistent football because of injury. He's had a double hernia operation. I don't really know how that looks. We know Ben Godfrey had one of them and sort of played, I think, a week or 2 after having the operation. So I don't know how that affects individuals, but obviously it affected Ben Gibson far more than Ben Godfrey. A hernia isn't like a hamstring or sort of a calf or whatever. I think once that's operated on, that's then fixed, and I think Ben Gibson, hopefully for his sake as well, hopefully that has been fixed, because, you know, it's, as I always say in these videos, it's a tragedy when a player of top quality sort of falls to injury, really, because you know, your football career is then sort of decided on the fate of your body rather than sort of your head and your ability to be a footballer. But I think that's probably about everything for Ben Gibson. I want to keep this video nice and short, because there's not really too much substance to what we know about him in terms of this idea of why he hasn't played at Burnley for so long. But I'll leave a link in the description to this article that I read, because it's a very interesting one. It was written on the 7th of July, and it was sort of an interview with Sean Dyche, and you can sort of pick and choose which quotes you pay attention to in terms of why he might not be playing for Burnley. You sort of have to read between the lines at this point, because no manager often really sort of says why a player isn't playing. There'll always be this sort of excuse because you don't sort of want to get embroiled in media controversies, do you? But that's probably everything we know about Ben Gibson. He's got 2 years left on his contract, so he would cost Norwich City a fair whack, I'd imagine. You know, I'd imagine it would be less than £15 million, but I don't know if I've said this in a video yet, but my assumption is that Norwich City will spend between 10 to 12 million pounds, and I don't think you're going to spend all of that on one player. I said the same about Alfie Mawson. Whether that means that Norwich City should sign him on loan, yeah, sure, why not? But I think Ben Gibson is at a point in his career, you're sort of 27 years old, in your sort of peak years, where you're going to want to settle down at a club and sort of have a go at it, have a fair crack at it. So I don't think a loan would be the most sensible option. Loan with an option to buy, whatever, who knows? But again, that sort of banks on success Gibson, Norwich City never sort of gamble on success, do they? As we saw from the 2019-2020 season. But that's everything on Ben Gibson, to be honest with you. That's all I can really think of off the top of my head. I'm very keen to know your thoughts in the comments down below on Ben Gibson and sort of what you think you would bring to Norwich City. But to answer the actual question, I do think Norwich City should sign Ben Gibson. I think he'd be a decent signing. He's got a lot of sort of experience. Now I can't think of another word to sort of use in terms of experience, because it's sort of an overused word, but it's the right word to use in this circumstance, I suppose. I think he'd be a decent signing for no more than £7 million is the figure I'm going to whack out there. I didn't really plan on whacking a figure out, but I thought I might as well, just because it's the end of the video. But as I said, make sure you let me know your thoughts in the comments down below on Ben Gibson. A big thanks for 1,000 subscribers again. Here's to 2,000, although that sort of number makes my knees weak at the moment. But yeah, I'm very keen for you to like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. Again, thank you to everyone who has. I'm sure I'll be back again with another transfer video sometime soon. So until next time, we'll see you again very, very soon.